We'll call to order the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority Board of Directors meeting today, Wednesday, April 27, 2022 at 6 p.m. Roll call.
President Thompson.
Present.
Vice President Duffy.
Present.
Secretary Flores.
Here.
Director Anderson.
Here.
Director Kirkland.
Here.
Director Baker.
Here.
Thank you. Item 3 is citizen communication. Any citizen wishing to speak during citizen communication regarding an item on or off the agenda may do so after completing the required registration card. All comments must be no more than 3 minutes in length. Any comments regarding items not on the posted agenda may not be discussed or responded to by the BCRUA board per state law. And we have citizen comments from our mayor of Leander, Mayor Delisle. Come on up.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody. I am Christine Delisle. I am the mayor of Leander. I wanted to talk tonight about a meeting that was recently held of the mayor, city managers, and operation committee members of BCRUA to discuss concerns with Leander's growth projections and the potential strain on the system. Prior to the meeting, I assure you, I and council had no idea that our partner cities had these concerns and needed more information from us. This meeting prompted a 2-hour update to council at our own council meeting last week, which is viewable on the city's website. It brought everybody up to speed so we're all on the same page about where we're at with both of our water treatment plants, including the BCRUA. It also spurred us to fast track the hiring of a water conservation specialist. We have a standing item on our council agenda for staff to update council and the public on the hiring of this position, so we can assure that this progresses without any unnecessary delays. Council has also asked to review the city manager's plan in response to Ms. Bondi's March 23rd email. This is going to be available to us at our May 5th meeting next week. We are attempting to improve our communications internally and externally, and our operations committee member, Mr. Grimsbow, has offered to hold a bi-weekly update with President Thompson, which will help to ensure that communication is more free-flowing in the future. I'm deeply committed to this partnership, and if you ever feel like Leander is anything other than 100% forthcoming, please do not hesitate to reach out to me personally, and I will do everything in my power to ensure we're being a good partner. Thank you all so much for your patience with us and the advice you provided at the meeting, and a special thank you to the City of Round Rock for having Jessica Woods reach out to us to offer assistance. We appreciate you and look forward to strengthening our partnership and working together for years in the future. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll move on to item 4, approval of the minutes. 4A, consider approval of the BCRUA meeting minutes from January 26, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. Item 5, staff reports. 5A, consider an update from General Manager regarding the Phase 2 raw water delivery system construction contract, 36-inch pipeline repair claims, BCRUA water demand projections, and Williamson County ARPA funds.
Thank you, Madam President. It's been a few months since we've got together, so I wanted to provide updates on some key activities that BCRUA has ongoing. First and foremost, the Phase 2 deep water intake construction contract response to our request for proposals have been obtained and reviewed. And so we are not asking for approval today, but I do want to ask our engineer and project manager, Aaron Archer, to come up and summarize the contractor proposal selection process.
Thank you, Karen, and good evening. We opened proposals for the Phase 2 raw water delivery system project back on March 22nd. We received a total of 6 proposals. One of those 6 was determined to be non-responsive. So we then moved into evaluation and ranking of those proposals using the selection criteria that included considering the proposer's team structure and their organization, their qualifications and their experience, their project approach, and also their cost proposal. The total proposal prices, all inclusive of a number of different bid items, ranged from a low of $225 million to the upper end of $360 million. Based on evaluation of those 5 proposals and a subsequent interview, the Thale SAK joint venture is the highest ranked proposer. Offering best value is determined by the selection criteria that had been established in the contract bid documents. A recommendation to award letter has been prepared to recommend that BCRUA make that award to Thale SAK joint venture in the amount of approximately $225 million. And so at this point, we've got a number of steps that we're going to work through over the next month, the first of which is we've got to go back to the Water Development Board, which is the funding entity for this project, to get approval for a contingent award of contract. And then we will come back to the BCRUA Board in May at the May 18th meeting, followed by City Council approvals, and then be able to move to a notice of award in early June. And we estimate that the notice to proceed would occur roughly mid-June timeframe. Any questions?
Thank you, Aaron. Regarding funding, our funding application to the Texas Water Development Board included $220 million for Phase 2 construction of the deep water intake, including contingency. The highest ranked proposer had a contract rate of $225 million, and that uses all of our contingency. However, we have obtained funding from the Water Development Board for additional items that would be completed later, including the Pernales Electric Co-op's permanent power project and the Phase 1D water treatment plant expansion. So we've been in discussions with the Texas Water Development Board, which, as Aaron mentioned, does need to approve our contract award. And they have agreed that we have adequate funding to award the contract in total. They agreed that we could use the funds that we obtained for the future PEC and Phase 1D project, if needed, on this Phase 2 construction contract, as long as we backfill any funds that we accelerate. Now, also, based on recent contract pricing, we know that these future projects, PEC, Phase 1D, as well as the Phase 2 deep water intake construction phase services, will cost more than what we have budgeted. So staff is developing a cash flow projection for all the projects, and we will work with the operating committee to determine the funding needs, any additional funding that is needed, and how each city will want to finance that. And then we'll report back to the board. We plan to move forward with requesting your approval of award of the Phase 2 contract, as Aaron said, on the May 18th board meeting. And we'll review all the rankings of the proposers at that meeting. But please let me know if you would like any more detailed information before that time.
I had a question. So we're going to kind of accelerate the funds from the other 2 projects to kind of fully award the deep water project, right? So then, are we building contingencies on the 225, or does the 225 include contingencies already?
There are no contingencies right now in the 225. We expect we will need contingency, assuming there will be some change orders along the way through the 5-year contract. So we're talking with the finance directors of each city to talk about whether they would make funds available as needed, or do we want to go ahead and bank some contingency fund in advance? So those are some of the conversations we're having.
We're still figuring that out. Okay, thank you.
When do you anticipate the cash flow projections will be updated?
We plan to do that in the next few weeks.
Thank you.
We don't have an immediate need to make a decision about whether we want to borrow more funds. If we wanted to borrow more funds from the Water Development Board, that process would begin in January, end of this year timeframe.
Can I for your update?
That's,
Okay.
that was the first part of the update. Moving to our 36-inch underwater pipeline that we filed claims to the original contractor and engineer regarding the break and the repair of that pipeline. We did send, I don't have a lot of update, but it's been a while since we talked about it, when we used to talk about it all the time. So we did send the notice of claims to Granite, the construction company, and Jacobs Engineering Company. And both firms subsequently had their lawyers contact us, and they asked for all of the documents that we had, the underwater videos, the original construction related documents that we had. So and our the forensics engineering that we had done. So we provided them all those documents. And what they decided to do is they're going to hire their own independent engineer to review everything and then make a decision about how they want to come back to us. So our attorney, Don Holcomb, he's going to keep checking with them to make sure that they are making progress. And so I'll let you know next time there's something to report there. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the last item, the ARPA funds, next, since it's related to this pipeline. So Williamson County contacted me a few weeks ago about potentially providing a grant to BCRUA for a water supply project using the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds, that they have been awarded by the federal government. So we, Aaron and I, developed and sent them a list of projects that we have ongoing. And the county selected this 36-inch underwater pipeline replacement project as what they thought would be most applicable, done within the time frame that they needed, and other requirements that they have. So when Aaron had reported to you all about the cost of the replacement project, it was about $3 million just for the construction, and that was a preliminary estimate. But we also know there's federal procurement rules that will likely increase the cost, not only the construction cost, but the administrative effort of the project. So I told them that I think we would want to receive a grant of $6 million, basically doubled it, and they said they thought that would work. So I've been told that if the county wants to award the grant to us, everything would need to be finalized by the end of May. Of course, we've accelerated our board meeting to May 18th, so I'm expecting that I would bring this to you May 18th for consideration. I don't have a lot of details right now, so we'll be working those out. All of your attorneys and financial directors are fully engaged, and hopefully we can get all this pulled together by the board meeting. Otherwise, I'll have to call a special board meeting for hopefully would be $6 million. The last item I wanted to give you an update on is related to the water demand projections that Leander's mayor had mentioned. As we near summertime here, we are more closely monitoring the member cities' water use from the treatment plant. And every week we report the daily and the peak hour water use by each city's diversion point, and compare that to the maximum water availability agreed to in the Master Contract 6th Amendment that you all approved in December. Understanding that these demands vary based on how each city uses their other water sources, and every city does have, alternative water sources or supplemental water sources besides BCRUA. The most recent report states that Leander is using about 60% of its maximum day capacity and about 85% of its peak hour capacity. Cedar Park is using about 12% of its maximum daily and 12% of its peak hour. And Round Rock's using about 19% of its maximum daily and 9% of its peak hour capacity. We also have updated projections that I understand, as the mayor mentioned, that each of your staff are briefing your city council, so I'm not going to go into it unless you have any specific questions. But we also know that right now, BCRUA doesn't have a process in place to address the event of any member city exceeding its capacity. So I plan to ask the operating committee to develop such a process that, when completed, would be brought back to the board for consideration. And that's my update. President Thompson, do you have anything you'd like to add, or?
Not tonight. Thank you. Are there any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
as far as the peak, that's for this past month?
That's the last day we've recorded from the past month, yes.
So I just want to understand the 85%, the peak, and it's not even hot yet, so I'm kind of a little concerned by that number, so. Just want to get that out there.
That is a high number, and I know that the mayor and Director Grisbo and others have been working on some projects to make sure we stay within the capacity we need to stay within as a city. Part of that is the conservation coordinator that's being hired, and some other things that are in the works that I know we've shared with Karen and with Aaron before.
Also, just consider the peak hour capacity is a less concerning number than the max day capacity would be.
Right, so I'm looking forward to whatever is going to be
Right.
implemented and
It's only for a shorter amount of
getting the
time.
updates, so.
Like if you were 85% of max day, you'd be in more trouble. Am I not thinking about this correctly?
You are, another thing to consider too is that our Sandy Creek location has been under maintenance. And so that's part of the reason that
Oh,
there's
yeah.
an increase in our usage with BCRUA.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And so I guess the intention with the OC developing the process, it's going to be a twofold, that we're going to receive updates, kind of where the conservation, the implementation of some of these remedies are going to be. We're going to be updated on that.
We'll be updated on that,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I think as long as everything's being done, whatever it takes to not negatively impact the other cities, definitely it's a concern. And it's unfortunate we're here because we've kind of been doing all the things without, and unfortunately had some delays on being able to progress. So we're behind anyway. So I appreciate just, the forethought and the teamwork with the OC and everyone to get some of this stuff implemented. But I do think we need to have updates as well,
Okay.
the progress.
And Director Griswold, would you like to add anything to it? Your conversation, I know you're intimately aware of all the things that are going on.
Good evening. Yes, Dan Grimsbo, the Executive Director of Infrastructure for the City of Leander. And how we use the water from the BCRA is that we could take it right up to the limit and not take the water from Sandy Creek. So the numbers are deceiving. So in the winter, especially because we have maintenance, we were doing 80-20 split. In the summer, if you want to say it, we'll do a 60-40 split. But we like to use more water from the BCRA as a whole, because one thing is we have 3 connections, and so we can get it through the city probably in a better way, especially because the city's developed more on the east side along Ronald Reagan. So that's a way to get it where Sandy Creek wasn't designed necessarily to get through all the old piping of the city to get to that side. The other thing is Sandy Creek's lagoon is limited, so every time we use it to the max, we're filling up the lagoon faster, which then we have to haul off, basically vacuum it and haul off, and it's mostly water. It's very expensive. So every time if we don't use Sandy Creek, the city's saving water. So every time we're using the BCRA to support the city and not necessarily Sandy Creek because of the limitations of the sludge. That helps the city as a whole. So the numbers are not concerning, they're just the numbers to show what we're using from BCRA, maybe by Sandy Creek. So I don't know how else to explain that other than it's just a choice from the city on how we're gonna best move the water around and use both plants in an efficient manner that helps support the city in the long run.
Well, and we have to trust what you're saying and all the things, and we want the updates, but the way that we were presented by our engineers was that there is not the capacity. And so I don't know if we have that slide available, but that was an indicator to us from our council perspective. And so again, appreciating the efforts and the implementation and moving things forward. But again, we have an obligation to our taxpayers, and so we want to make sure that every bit of transparency and the implementation of the conservation and all the things are rolling forward. Because, all due respect, we're about 2 years behind because we were stalled out on some different, not you, Christine, but the former council and Leander.
No, I fully understand, and when I got aboard, I fully understand where the situation of Leander was. And Karen can tell you, I've been transparent from the very beginning, from day one, and have been providing that information not only to the city of Leander, but the OC committee all along. And we've taken numerous steps, and if this council or this board wants for me personally to provide a presentation to show exactly where we are and what we're doing, I'm more than happy to do that, because I don't want any ambiguity amongst any parties. And yes, we're going to have some difficult times, but we also know that and are taking steps to ensure that we mitigate those potential issues.
If that wouldn't be disagreeable to everybody, I think that's a good idea to provide that update to the BCRUA at our meetings, if you would do that.
Yes, ma'am, we can
in the
do that.
future. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Does that
Wait,
answer your
I
question?
got one question.
Yeah.
So, we all know right now there's explosive growth in this region, and that's gonna put a massive demand on the needs for additional water. Cedar Park, we're in a unique position where we've done a lot of our growth already, and now we have infill. So, and from the numbers that were given to us earlier, we're under 20% use, according to those numbers. We're in the part of the year where people are just starting to water, their yards are just starting to green up. I'm a landscaper, I used to pull permits in Leander. You've got properties that are multiple acres that were forced by permit to sod the entire lot. So I'm kind of concerned with how you're going to balance the needs of your existing residents with all these future residents that'll be moving into the area, with all these processes taking a long time to come to fruition. And because we stalled out on some of the different things, including the electrical, that should have already been started and maybe even completed by now. And now we're hearing that all these costs have escalated massively. I heard walking into this room almost 40%. So these are costs that get passed on to all of our taxpayers. And so I have concerns that we meet the needs for everybody in the region.
Okay, there was I'm not sure there was a question in there, so what was the question?
The question is, we all have issues with and concerns about what's being reported. 80%, and we're not even near summer yet. What's today's temperature? 70 degrees? And at 80%, it's 70 degrees. Last week was like 85, 90. We're gonna hit 100, 105, and they're saying it's supposed to be dry this summer. So it's gonna be a long summer. So my concern is, how are you gonna be able to mitigate the need for water with all your existing residents? Because in the past 2 or 3 years, you've had to come to Cedar Park and ask us to help you with water. And each time we started transporting water over to you, and then all of a sudden the boil notice would come up. And so we'd have to stop because we cannot put our water for our residents at any risk. And so my question to you is, and what I want to hear from this board is how we're going to protect all of our water rights.
So I'm not going to address that question right now because I think I have to take that back and discuss it not only with the city, but the OC, because some of that I don't know, and I'm not sure that Cedar Park provided Leander water in its strictest sense, because some of the things that I've learned since I got on board was not ever exceeding that contract amount. And 2 summers ago when that was brought up, and it was, for my understanding, a very short duration. But what we have done to help mitigate even that concern is that we've installed 2 24-inch water lines, and one of them is a third connection to the BCRUA. The other one is part of the San Gabriel pump station, which was just completed, which will allow water to be moved from the Ronald Reagan endpoint or intake to the kind of the west side of the city. So that's going to help. The other things that we are doing is we have included tier rates for the city. We have initiated a relook at the irrigation or the landscaping. We've talked about following the comp plan and not converting zoning from commercial to residential and others. There's a phasing plan. Other things that we have looked at is that we're looking at the peak hour, and we had a talk with the BCRA staff and LSID, and we're going to be talking with the homeowners association about level loading, if you want to say that peak hour. You know, we're going to see where everybody seems to want to use the water, and then if LSID is watering, you know, ball fields at that time, we can shift it so that peak hour is not as bad because you have that shift. We're working with Georgetown on their water that they need. Unfortunately, when I first got on board, I met with Liberty Hill, and they would have loved to have had an additional 1 million gallons of water, and we had to tell Liberty Hill, no, we couldn't do that, and because we don't have the capacity for that. But I want to remind not only this board, but everybody who's attending, that the graph that you might have seen that was presented, and if it was the graph that was presented during the meeting with the city managers and the mayor, those are projections that the city of Leander is submitting, and that's if we do nothing. It's the worst case scenario, hottest, worst possible, driest day, and that's what you're going to see. But over the past year, we've taken multiple steps through projects, through mitigation to include water conservation. We're watering only once a week currently, so we're in what's called phase 2, and we'll continue that. And so we are and do understand and have been forthcoming to everybody in this room about what we're doing and where we're at. So, I mean, that's what I can best say on what we're doing to facilitate making improvements. But remember what the numbers are, because I went back in history a little bit. In 2020, the highest peak that we've had in the past 6 years has only been 16.7 million gallons per day. That's the highest peak. And now you're looking at the peak for BCRUA, and that's fine. But again, 2020 was bad. Now last year was the peak for the city during the whole summer. Great summer was around 14. We do have 25 million gallon per day capacity, so we haven't even exceeded 17 million gallons as a complete maximum peak day yet. So we have a buffer, for sure, and we're working to try to maintain as much of that buffer as we can, even through the hottest summer days.
Thank you. And to answer your question, that's why Karen wants to take that suggestion back to the operating board to figure out what we need to do should one of our partner cities get close to that level or exceed it. And we'll be able to make, I guess, to vote on it and decide how we want to move forward with that once they come up with the plan. Any other questions or discussion?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Does that conclude your update?
That concludes my update.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move to item 6, resolutions. 6A, consider a resolution approving the BCRUA quarterly investment report for October 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This report is for the quarter ending December 2021. Not only does that seem like a long time ago, it was a long time ago. And just to refresh memories where we were back then, Omicron was still with us and there was no war in Ukraine. That has nothing to do necessarily with the investment report, but it does kind of put perspective in how things have changed since then. But the report is as of December 2021. We ended the quarter with $134 million in the portfolio. The vast majority of that was the November closing with the Water Development Board between the city of Cedar Park and Leander. That was $115 million between the two cities. That occurred in November of 2021. So that was the bulk of the 134 that we ended the quarter in. The remaining $19 million represents the other pockets of funds. The majority is $12 million remaining from the 2009 original issues. So earnings for the quarter, which October through December 2021, $18,000, 168. The average yield, 0.11%. So again, that was a long time ago in perspective. The weighted average maturity of the investments was 67 days. During the quarter, the most significant activity on the investment side was that shortly after closing with the Water Development Board, Leander and Cedar Park invested $39 million of our loan funds in commercial paper for a 9-month maturity, which will mature in August of 22. At the time, Techstar was paying 0.014%, and the commercial paper was approximately 0.3%, so 20 times more. So that's the good news. Unfortunately, the bad news is we exceeded our investment policy allotment percentage of any one type of investment for commercial paper. Policy says 25%. I'll take 85% of the blame. The investment advisor and I were discussing it. We got our wires crossed and thought that we had changed the percentage up to 30% in September. But the facts proved otherwise, and we were over the limit. Going forward, rates, as everyone knows, have begun to increase dramatically based on where they were this time last year. So as we invest the remaining funds that we've already taken down, and then Leander will have another draw in November of 22. We have more investment opportunities to invest with treasuries and other non-commercial paper investments. I'll close with just to advise the board, since we are kind of late in presenting the December report, the March report will be ready soon. But in January and February, Leander and Cedar Park invested another $39 million in U.S. Treasuries to mature in 1 and 2 years. So we're taking the opportunity to try to time those investments. And as Ms. Bondi mentioned, once the finance folks and the engineers can talk about the cash flow over the project, then we can really lay out a more thoughtful investment strategy, because $225 million is a lot to sit in the bank. So we'll be making sure we push that out as fast as we can. Happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions or discussion?
I had a few questions. So with regards to the miscue, on the threshold on the commercial paper, so how do we safeguard that in the future? A follow-up to that question is, obviously we're acknowledging that we realize that it was a mistake. So with regards to a future audit, is that just a disclosure we make early on that happened? And I forgot my third one at the moment, but go ahead and answer those.
So I believe so in terms of the disclosure during the audit. The policy is the board's policy. We violated our own rules. We've communicated with the board and we can, in my experience, the auditors do follow up with an entity's investment activity and policies during the year. So when this time comes, when we're auditing in October, November next year, we'll fully disclose that. Safeguards, I don't mean to be flippant about this, but the best lesson is a good slap in the rear. And so certainly everyone on the Finance Committee know that the policy did not change. And I think that is really where the miscue happened, is we had, because of the low interest rate environment, again, we were talking 0.0 and then a number on interest rates. It was almost completely flatlined. Our investment advisor was recommending that, made a number of recommendations on the policy to change. We took those recommendations and discussed them at the operating committee and decided to only move forward with one or two of those recommendations. One of their recommendations was to increase commercial paper up to 30%. Another recommendation was to increase the WAM to 3 years. Once the three cities talked about that, we decided we did not want to make those changes in the policy. The board approved the policy in September. Our investment advisor, David Mazur, that's tasked with our account, he didn't hear back from me. He made notes that the recommendations were approved. So we've cleared all that up. No more assumptions about that. That's the best I can say about going forward. I think it was a unique circumstance where the consultant was advising us to make changes. Typically, we take those in the past. We've taken those changes and pushed them through, and then a month or two later, the official signed copy gets sent back to the people for their file. So, but assumptions lead to outcomes like this, and we just regret that it happened. But I do think the lack of investment options, the large influx of $115 million and not wanting it to sit earning zero at the bank got me to be overeager, and it was actually I don't want to give them credit, but I have to because I'm in their house. It was the city of Cedar Park's finance folks that pointed out the 25%, so I hate to give them credit, but, yeah.
Well, and I don't believe for one moment there was any ill intent on behalf of investing the funds. I guess I'm just thinking, in the future, how, what can we do, or as a board or as an OC, to put a check and a double check on the process.
Yeah, and the only percentage parameter is around commercial paper in our policy. So it's that makes it less complicated. We don't have to look at other types of investments and make sure that they're within their allocations. Commercial paper, since it's not non-government issued, it's private sector debt. It's got a different risk factor, and so it's not uncommon to put some boundaries around that. I did have a long conversation with David, our investment advisor, with Patterson after it happened, and mirroring some of your questions, and, he does have each city's kind of checklist of what's allowed when he's making recommendations. They don't invest our funds. They tee it up, we have to approve it, and then it goes. So he does have each of their clients' parameters. The mistake that he made was he updated his, assuming that the policy that they submitted was approved in September. So that was the mistake he made. That's been, corrected on his end. But the allocation, the portfolio allocation is in each monthly report. All of the finance folks can look at that report, me included, and we can see where we're at with all of the investment types, whether it's the pools, treasuries, bonds, even with the Bank of New York, who is our escrow agent, as well as commercial paper. So that's the best I can answer for that question.
Thank you.
Hey, quick question, and you kind of started your comments off of this with the pandemic and the war and inflation, and just kind of a high level question. Anything that needs to be put kind of on our radar? Any adjustment of course? Anything we need to reanalyze? And the planning that we've done with all these kind of things thrown at us financially in the world market, I'm just curious how that affects us. Anything we need to be considering?
Obviously, I don't have an answer for that. I do think that when we have the opportunity to sit down with the engineers to look at the contractor's schedule of work and how they anticipate the spend, we will be looking at what investment opportunities we have, whether it's 1 year, 2 years out, and what those rates are. When I looked at the curve, the yield curve, it shoots up between 0 to 2% in the short term, which works for us because this project is, it's not a 10 to 20 year horizon. So once you get past 5-7 years, that yield kind of flattens. So I don't know if we'll be missing out yield-wise if we stay with the 2-year maturity. Last year when rates were flat, that's why the investment advisor was saying, go out 3 years because you can pick up some more yield the further out you go. I think things have changed a little bit since then, where it's really steep in the shorter period, which we like, because that's where we need to invest our money. It's got to be there when the contractor has to be paid, so we can't go out too long.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right,
Thank you.
thank you. This is action item 6A. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Item 6B is consider a resolution authorizing the president to execute supplemental agreement number 1 with Whitaker Lane Contracting LLC for the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority Agreement for BCRUA Phase 2 Raw Water Delivery System Tree Clearing Services.
Thank you, Madam President. In order to get some of our land cleared where the Phase 2 deep water intake construction was going to occur, we needed to get a contractor to clear some trees from those sites prior to the endangered species nesting season. So we had hired a contractor to Whitaker Lane to provide these tree clearing services. And I approved the contract. It was under $50,000. But there was one small site that we were unable to obtain this permit from Travis County until the last 2 days before nesting season. So this contractor had to demobilize, move its resources around, and then bring them back to get those that last site cleared right when we were needing in the last couple days. So he asked us for a charge for a second mobilization for $4,000, and that puts it over the $50,000 limit that requires board approval. So I'd be happy to answer your questions and request your approval of this resolution.
Anybody have any additional questions? No? Okay. I make a motion to approve this item.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. We are to our closing comments for tonight. Vice President Duffy?
Thank you to everyone for all the meetings, all the everything, and to our citizens, especially citizens of Leander. I know it's kind of a tedious and maybe a little unsure time, but I appreciate just the leaders of your city just coming together to try to make it work for y'all, but also for all of us since we're in this together. So
Thank you. All right, Secretary Flores.
Good night.
Citizen Director Anderson.
I just want to echo too that I appreciate all that the Leander staff is doing in trying to answer these questions and plan for the future.
Thank you. Citizen Director Kirkland.
Thank you for attending.
And Citizen Director Baker.
Good night, thank you.
All right. And my comments are Leander is growing at a rapid rate, unprecedented growth. And I'm just thankful for our staff working to try to make sure we stay in line and do what we need to do to make sure our residents have water, but that we support our partner cities as well. We want to be a good partner, and that's the goal. So we want to communicate clearly. We want to make sure we follow everything that we are supposed to, and that we come to y'all in clarity and honesty. So thank you for your support. Appreciate it. All right, good night.